Hi BookTube, my name is Juan, I am just one reader and I am here to review and discuss some of the books that I have read recently. Today I will be covering books numbers 6 through 10 that I have read thus far in 2021. The first one is the Gustav Sonata by Rose Tremaine. This is sort of historical literary fiction. It covers the Second World War. And it's the story essentially of this man who turns out to be gay. And so the novel is sort of broken up into three very distinct sections. The first two sections I really enjoyed. The first section is about him as a child, as a very young child. And we follow essentially his relationship with his mother. His mother is a very interesting character. She's severely disturbed. We can see right away that she's severely mentally ill. She's suffering from a very strong depression, and we can see that she's projecting many things onto her child. It's very evident, and we really connect, or I really connected as a reader, empathetically with the protagonist, with the child Gustav, because he really goes through a lot, and he suffers a lot. And Rose Tremaine, in my opinion, really captured incredibly well this feeling of loneliness, this feeling of peril, of being alone in the world, and feeling all of this despair and how he worries for his mother. But then it's also a very beautiful part of the novel. It's not just sad and horrible, and it's actually quite beautiful because we follow the relationship with his mother, which is actually also very interesting and beautiful sometimes. And we see his relationship with a classmate, and with that classmate's family, and we sort of have some conflict, historical conflict, because there's the Second World War is about to happen, or is happening. I don't quite remember. I don't remember exactly the timeline and the time period exactly in which this story takes place, but I do remember that there's some conflict between Jewish people, and so that was very interesting. Then the second part of the novel is very different. It's essentially a series of flashbacks, and we follow the mother. So the mother becomes a much more important character, and even though I didn't love this part at the beginning because I thought it really took a turn from the first section, which was about Gustav, now we follow his mother. So it almost becomes like another complete storyline, which it is. But we really get all the backstory and all the information regarding, how this mother came to be the way that we saw her be with Gustav. So I thought that was actually very different, but very interesting as well. And then the third and final section of the novel really took the book down for me, and it was really not the right way, in my humble opinion, to complete this novel, because we follow Gustav as a grown man, but I felt that everything that the author wanted us to feel was not achieved and was not earned, because it just felt very disjointed and very disconnected, and I just didn't really feel what I thought I should be feeling. I was very disappointed by the third section. But I will say that Rose Tremaine can write really well, and the first two sections I really enjoyed. So I gave it, I think, 3 stars. It's a book that I enjoyed, but I really need my books, the books that I read, to stick the landing, to have a really solid or thought-provoking ending, and this one was just not quite there for me. Then I read I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid, And after reading this, I watched the movie on Netflix, which I enjoyed, but I thought it was basically a more intellectual, pretentious version of this story. So I do prefer the book. I think the book is wonderful. The book I gave 4 stars to. I really, really loved it. It's not my favorite book in the world. It's not a perfect book, in my opinion, but it's very close to being perfect for what it's trying to be. So, what is it? I'm Thinking of Ending Things is a sort of psychological thriller, at least in the way that it's presented. So we follow the main storyline of 2 characters, a man and a woman, boyfriend and girlfriend, and they are driving to meet his parents. So she's going there to meet his parents. And we get there and some weird things start going on, and then there's sort of a detour, and things just get really, really crazy and wonderful and very intellectual, not in like a pretentious way like the movie does, but in a very like emotional way. Like you just start thinking and feeling and creating different theories in your mind of what could be going on. And I think that was really fun and really well delivered in the book. I think Ian Reid is a great storyteller and a really clever man. There are many ideas, complex, interesting, intelligent ideas that he is exploring in this novel, but he does it in a very emotional, like gut-wrenching way. So I love Ian Reid as a writer. This is my 2nd novel by his that I have read. The first one that I read, which was actually his follow-up to this one, is Foe. And that book I really loved it. It really took me by surprise in a good way. This one is, I don't know how to compare both of these novels, but anyway, this one I just thought was very emotional. It's really terrifying. He really manages, as an author, to capture and convey very primal anguish and anxiety and despair. You feel lonely, you feel cold, you feel desperate, you feel nonplussed and discomfited and confused and disoriented. He's really, really great. And he uses very simple, stark, plain language, which is something that I love. I really, really love it when authors can use the basic building blocks of language and manage to create like an entire physical experience for me as a reader. So I really, really can't sing this book's praises high enough. I gave it 4 stars. It was not quite a 5-star book for me, just because for me 5 stars are more they resonate with me on a personal way, I think. So I really loved it. Then I read Rebecca by Daphne Du Maurier. This was a reread. It's a book that I have read previously. And the reason why I read Rebecca was because I wrote a dissertation paper for my psychoanalytical training, which is kind of like a thesis in a way. It's like a very important final paper that all of us have to write at the ending of our training as psychoanalysts. And I decided to choose Daphne Du Maurier and in particular Rebecca. But I really talked about, in that paper, I wrote about her entire life and her entire body of work. But I primarily focused on Rebecca. So I really, really enjoyed rereading this gem of a novel. I was able to explore more nuances in terms of the characters and the different dynamics between the characters. I was able, of course, to understand why Daphne Du Maurier came up with this, how she came up with this. Of course, I cannot be sure because I would have to ask her in person, but I was able to fantasize and create some hypotheses that would explain why she subjectively produced this artistic creation. So I really, really enjoyed reading Rebecca. I enjoyed it much more than the first time that I read it. I still don't think this is her best work, not from what I have read. I think My Cousin Rachel is better. I think The Birds is better, the collection. Yeah, but I can see why this book is so well beloved. That's also partly part of why I wanted to make this dissertation paper. I wanted to understand why, from all of her really prolific body of work, this one is the most emblematic and the most popular. And I was able to create a theory about it, and it has to do with fairy tales, and with why fairy tales, according to psychoanalytical theory, work the way that they do, and what they really discuss internally in terms of the unconscious fantasies. So, love Rebecca. It was such a delight, and I gave it 4 stars. I don't think it's 5 stars, but I really loved it. Then the next book that I read was the biography of Daphne Du Maurier. This one is, I think, her most extensive biography from what I was able to understand. This one is by Margaret Forster, and it's Daphne Du Maurier, The Secret Life of the Renowned Storyteller. It's a pretty extensive biography. It's really, really, really well researched. It was sometimes painful to read because of the level of detail, the amount of detail. I really loved it, though, because I was able to feel like I was living her life with her. It's not super long. It's like 400 pages long, but it really covers an incredibly insane amount of detail. So I really recommend it. I love Daphne Du Maurier before I decided to make this dissertation project. But now that I've done it, now that I have finished my paper, I can tell you that this is just such a woman. This was such a character, such a persona. I was able to understand more about her inner conflicts in terms of her identity, in terms of her class status and her stance in the world, her family dynamics, her childhood. These are, of course, things that psychoanalysts love to talk about, so I really loved it, of course. I relished, knowing all the gossip of what was going on in the Du Maurier household, and, in the marriage between her parents, and then how she led such an interesting life. Very reclusive, very isolated, sort of quietly joyful, I would say. She had a very strong conflict in terms of identity and sexuality. She was not a simple woman, but because she was not a simple woman, she was able to create wonderful, complex, artistic gems, in my humble opinion. So I really loved this biography. If you could see the level of annotation that I did on this book and on Rebecca. I mean, I annotated every single page of these books. There's so much in here, and she was a person who probably could have benefited from psychoanalytic treatment. Sorry, my mouth is getting dry. She would probably have benefited from some treatment. But yeah, I think that most of the conflict that she experienced internally was expressed and maybe even worked through in her own writing. So that just goes to shows me the power of art, not only for the artist who creates, but for the person who is on the other side. And even decades after these books were created, we are still elaborating things from our own identities and our own subjectivities and conflicts because of her work, through her work. So, love it. So I gave these 4 stars as well. And then finally, I read East of Eden by John Steinbeck. So this is book number 10 that I read this year thus far. East of Eden, I think overall I feel very torn between the experience that I had reading this book and the book itself. The book itself I really enjoyed. I think the book itself, in terms of characters, plot, themes, and writing style in particular, was wonderful. However, my personal experience in this particular moment in my life reading this was not the best. So if I had to give this book like two separate ratings, one for the book itself and one for the experience, they would be different. The book would probably receive like 4.5 stars, but the experience, in all honesty, would be more of a 3. So I gave this book 3 because that's what I rank the experience of reading a book in a particular moment of time in my life. So this book follows, it's such an expansive book. It's hard to synthesize accurately, but it follows two families, many generations, many characters who follow their lives. It's very biblical in the way that, you know, it talks about rivalry and relationships between siblings and parents and children, and it's so melodramatic. I really enjoyed the drama. It was very dishy. It was very sort of like gossipy and saucy and interesting and sort of voyeuristic in the way that it makes the reader voyeuristic. It makes you feel, you know, like you just want to know more. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. I certainly did. The book is long, and I don't think that's a problem, but it was a problem for me because I had to pause my reading of this book sort of there by the halfway point because I had to write my Daphne Du Maurier project. So I sort of forgot this book. Well, not forgot, but I sort of put it down for a good 3 weeks, maybe longer, and when I came back to it, I just felt slightly disconnected, and my mind was still sort of reeling from, you know, Du Maurier and Rebecca and getting so immersed in her life and work. So coming back to this was a little bit hard. So I almost wish that I could have read this in another circumstance, and I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more. Maybe I will come back to it and reread it anew, like from the start in some other moment in my life. But at this point, I think I'm gonna let it simmer a little bit. So that's book 10, and those are books numbers 6 through 10 that I have read this year. I would love to read your comments down below. Give me some recommendations. Tell me what you think. I really look forward to all of the discussions in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. I am Just One Reader, and I will see you on the next video.